Hey, it's Sandra. Welcome to another episode of Asexualise, my asexual life. It's supposed to be for education about asexuality, all things asexual. I share my asexual life journey in order to help you and yours. If you haven't already subscribed, please hit the great big subscribe button, bell icon right now so you never miss an episode. If you don't know who I am Sandra Bellamy, author of this awesome Asexual Perspectives book out on Amazon. Grab your copy now. So I've got a special Pride Month, Asexual Pride episode. Happy Pride Month to you. And this episode is all about what to do if your friends and family don't support your asexuality. So first of all, if your friends and family are not supporting your asexuality, I'm really sorry to hear this. It can be very disheartening and invalidating when people don't understand asexuality, when people put you down about your asexuality, when people try to prove that you're not actually asexual, you know damn well you are. And, you've got people trying to dictate your life view of the life they want because, to be honest, the reason they do this is because they're extremely uncomfortable. And this is not your fault that they're uncomfortable. This is actually a problem with them, that they can't accept things that are different to them, that are unknown, that are unfamiliar, that to them are unnatural, right? But this doesn't mean to say you have to apologize for who you are or invalidate yourself by trying to play small and not actually admitting you're asexual and hiding who you are. So make sure you're not doing that. I know it's very difficult coming out to people a lot of the time. I personally was very lucky with my parents because they accepted my asexuality and it made sense to them as why I was the person I am. Like all the years of them not understanding me, some of that misunderstanding or not understanding at all actually made sense to them when they found out that I'm asexual. And I didn't even know it was a big thing, a big deal at that time. I know that might sound a bit harsh and uncaring and unfeeling because there's a big deal to a lot of people. But I didn't even think twice about it because I didn't see anything wrong with it. I just was so in awe of the fact that I found the asexual community and I thought, my God, I think I found people like me. I thought I was the only one in the entire world, planet, and universe that didn't want sex and didn't look at someone and think I want sex with them, even though I have had sex in the past, and who desired a romantic relationship without sex. And so, I was just like, dumbfounded. I'm like, oh my God, there is actual people like me. I didn't know other people existed like me. And so I was that in awe and the excitement and wonder of like, oh my God, there are real other people in real life, not fictional characters, but real life like me. And that awakening was just so marvelous and so exhilarating that I kind of wanted to shout it from the rooftops. Maybe that's because I'm introverted. Introverted. Maybe that's because I'm not introverted, I should say, but extroverted. Maybe that's just because, like, of my personality. But I think a lot of it as well was just pure excitement. I didn't even think twice about saying it to my parents, but they know that, from talking to me over the years, that I hate nudity. And my mum and dad, well, I used to talk more about that type of thing probably to my mum, but my mum and dad very much know everything about me, like what one knows, the other knows. So they knew I didn't like nudity and they didn't really get it. But as soon as I said I'm asexual and I explained what it was, and over time they're like, oh yeah, it makes sense now. They thought I don't like nudity because it's some sort of insecurity on my part, but it's not. I genuinely don't like nudity. I think, like, I'm only attracted to guys, and I think guys look better with their clothes on. I don't mind the top off with a guy if a guy's got his top off in private with me, but I don't even like hairy chests on a guy. I don't. Do you know what I mean? And so I'm really not into like traditional hairy guys. You'll have to excuse me because I'm streaming in the daytime, which I don't usually do, and I live bang next to a bridge, and there's not much soundproofing here, so you're gonna hear some noise in the background. Because this is live. I'm not editing it. So yeah, so when I told my parents, they were like, oh, by the second phone call, because I spoke to them on the phone, I was just walking down one of the streets in my city of Exeter in the UK telling them, oh, I think I'm asexual, And so to me, it was just like no big deal in the sense of telling them, but a big deal as in the sense I found out who I was and my identity. And it's a shock, in terms of like you find out your sexual orientation that you never knew you were. I thought I was heterosexual for years. I dated, well, I had relationships, I should say, because I didn't really do dating as a kid or teenager or a young adult, should I say. I date now, but I still consider myself a young adult in the sense I've got a 21st mindset. So, but I didn't start actual dating until I split up with, well, my ex split up with me in 2011. I had a year's break and then started doing some dating, which I'd never really done before because I kind of like like don't really like it in the sense that I prefer just to like find the right person. But we live in the 21st century now and things have changed and moved on. And now there's online dating, and asexuals are going to find it hard to find someone in person for a relationship. So online dating's our go-to place for dating, right? The majority of the time, unless we go to asexual meetups and happen to meet someone who's the right person for us at them. So so very much, for me, I didn't know that coming out was so difficult and such a big thing in that way. But when I told two friends that I think I'm asexual, because at that point, when I very early point, I said the word think because I was just coming to terms with like what I discovered. I like didn't totally know at that point what type of asexual I was. It was like 3 weeks before I fully realized what type of asexual I am. And so I knew I was only attracted to guys, but when I told one of the women I've worked with at two places actually, I was walking home with her part of the way home because she lived near me. And she was like, "Oh, come on, you always like guys." She didn't believe me. You just haven't met the right guy yet. And this is the type of thing that people say because they think, like you're going to meet the right guy and all of a sudden it's going to change you. And I hate that because it's very invalidating. It's basically saying you don't know your own mind. It's also they think they know better than you about yourself. It's being very judgmental. And, it comes across as just really not accepting you for who you are, which is what we all want at the end of the day. We want to be accepted for who we are. So we want to try to get away from being judged and away from people who are criticizing us. And we want to be around people who accept us for who we are. Having said that, like in some scenarios, you need feedback, right? But feedback would be like talking about a behavior you do that's not acceptable or not appropriate for that situation. Like saying you're not asexual is not feedback. It's telling you what you are and are not, right? That's not feedback. That's blatantly someone pushing their own opinions and judgments onto you, which is not okay. So you don't want to be around these people who are putting you down, who are belittling you, who are making you feel invalidated and being horrible about your sexual orientation and identity. We live in a world, unfortunately, that isn't fair in many ways, and we are going to come across people in our life that don't agree with us, that don't accept us, that don't like the fact we're asexual. And that isn't a problem we have in the sense that we should not stop being ourselves. It's a problem that they have that they can't accept it and comprehend it. Right? That says a lot about them. Says they're very inflexible, they're very in their own heads fixed for everything to be a certain way. And they're not really thinking outside the box. They're living a very kind of conditioned robotic life that only thinks one way. And so whilst not everything's their fault in the sense that everyone's conditioned usually from birth, the majority of time, not all the time, because there's a lot more LGBT plus relationships these days and marriages, but the majority of the time people are conditioned from birth to believe heterosexuality is the sexuality and everyone has to be that way. And so it's good that there are LGBT plus relationships now and more people coming out on the LGBT plus spectrum, because it means that younger children, some of them are not seeing this conventional stereotypical conditioning where they have to be a certain sexual orientation. However, they may think they need to be the sexual orientation of their parents if their parents are both lesbian, for example, because that might be what they're used to. I was used to gays being okay because I lived near two gay guys who were a couple with a dog, and they lived just around the corner from me. So I was always brought up that being gay is fine. I'm not personally gay, but I've always been brought up that being gay is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. My parents are conservative in some ways, but they're very open-minded in others, which is quite strange. Like if they see someone cross-dressing, they don't think it's a bad thing. And they understand that sometimes people, for example, they know someone who used to be married to a woman and present as a guy, but after his wife died, he then came out as a woman with in a cross-dressing sense. I don't believe he changed his identity, but he was a cross-dresser rather than a trans person, I think. So my parents like understood that, and they're accepting of that, and they're accepting of gays. And so I'm quite fortunate in that respect, even though they're very conservative and traditional. Like my mum's a housewife, my dad used to go out to work, retired now, but my mum's still a full-time housewife for him, basically does everything in terms of cooking and cleaning and stuff usually. I think my dad rarely does the washing up. Occasionally he does it, I think, but which is good, but not that often in comparison to everything my mum does. So my mum really looks after my dad well. They got a very traditional relationship in that way. Um, so I was fortunate that my parents like accepted that. They don't always like me talking a lot about asexuality. Sometimes I have got comments from them like, "Can you give it a rest? You're talking about it again." And so, that isn't great, but I still carry on talking about it anyway because, I am who I am at the end of the day, and asexuality is a big part of my life. And I don't personally think that I should stop talking about who I am and the things I do in terms of asexuality. But I don't just talk about asexuality, I talk about other things with them because obviously they can't relate to it as much because they don't understand it so much as I do. So it's only fair that I talk about other stuff and don't just talk about asexuality. Sometimes I talk about it a lot less. Sometimes I don't talk about it much because obviously I don't need to because I've got this channel, and they know I'm asexual. And so it's just kind of normal for them to like hear it now. That's one of the tips I would give you though, if you're having friends and family that don't understand asexuality, you can try and explain it to them and educate them, first of all, because obviously people who don't understand things have this thing in their brain like, I don't get it. I really don't get it. So obviously the first step would be if they're willing to be educated about it. Some people aren't willing to be educated about it. They don't want to know. They're uncomfortable with it and they'll shut you off. I've actually had a friend who did this in the past. They're a lot better with me now, but this was someone I was very close to at one point. And I guess I've still got a bond with this person as well. And they used to be I knew they were uncomfortable about it because every time I talked about my asexuality, they would just change the subject, kind of shut it down. And, even to this day, this person does not understand, but they're a lot more supportive. They don't understand that asexuality is not about choosing not to have sex. It's not about going several months without sex. It's not due to I was going to say circumstantial evidence, due to circumstances that, that you're not having sex. That's not asexuality. And sometimes when they're talking, if they're saying, oh, like, for example, they haven't had sex for a while, they might think they're like me in terms of being asexual. But it's like it's a sexual orientation. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of good if people understand that there are times when you're not having sex. Like not everyone, she's heterosexual, and so she's not asexual. And so when she says things about that she's like asexual, I think it's nice in the sense that maybe she's trying to relate to me more, and kind of like align with me more in that way. But at the same time, it kind of feels like a little invalidating, as in the sense she doesn't entirely know what it means. And it's kind of like she's got the concept wrong. But I don't go around saying to her, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, because she just doesn't understand asexuality. And she was completely uncomfortable. So all I do is just listen to her point of view, and she does support me now in terms of she's like, saying, "Oh, I see you're doing good with your channel. I see your posts and stuff like that." And basically she says like it's 21st century, so now is the time for this to happen. I don't know why I've got someone doing my doorbell. I'm not expecting anything. So someone's ringing my doorbell for some reason. But anyway, so yes. So, I think it's nice in one way that she's trying to relate to me, because if she didn't care at all, she probably wouldn't bother even trying to relate to me. But at the same time, you know, it's a little bit invalidating, as in the sense she doesn't understand asexuality. It's like saying anyone who's not having sex for like X amount of months or a period of time is asexual. Anyone who can do kissing and other stuff without having sex is asexual. That's not asexuality. Asexuality is a genuine sexual orientation that's a lack of sexual attraction. So it means I don't get the need for sex. I don't get the want for sex. I don't get the urge for sex. It doesn't mean to say I couldn't participate in it, but because I'm now a sex repulsed asexual, for me, I can't do that because I just can't do it. Like when I'm thinking about, like even contemplating doing that, my I'm like shut down on it. Like I'm like, you just can't physically do it, Sam, because it's not what you want to do. Sometimes I'm asking myself, could you do that again? Because I've had that in the past and it would make my life a lot easier in terms of then I could date heterosexuals. But I just can't do that. And I can't see me ever doing that ever again. And even if I did, it wouldn't be to the level that a heterosexual would require. It's even when I was in heterosexual relationship, I thought the most I'd want to do it in terms of being willing to do it and okay with it would be about once. It was consensual when I did it in the past, but like I thought the most I even think about doing is like once every 3 months. And then probably when the third month came around, I'd be like, oh, okay, I don't want to do it now. But it was consensual in the past, but it's hard for me to think about doing that now, when like the last time I even thought about trying to do that, because the guy I was dating, well, in a short-term relationship, because in the end I wouldn't have sex. He like cheated on me within 3 weeks. That was really bad. That was in 2013, a long time ago. So, like this guy who was really good looking, really my aesthetic type, really so loved kissing him, didn't mind close body contact with him. But when he wanted the sex, I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't. However hot and good looking the guy is, I just couldn't. Even though I do experience arousal, which is a bodily function. It's not like me wanting sex. It's just like genitalia tingling or whatever. then even though I experience that, it doesn't make me want sex. So traditionally, heterosexuals get aroused and immediately kind of have the urge, want, and need for sex at the exact same time as the arousal. The arousal is making them want to have sex. With me, it's different. This is why I'm asexual. It's hard, I guess, for people to understand this if they're not actually asexual themselves. But the only way I can describe it is I don't get that innate need. I'm not wired that way. So my arousal is the extent of my sexual excitement, if you want to term it like that. And that's kind of where it ends. After that, I'm not like feeling I want to have sex. The genitalia doesn't appeal to me. I don't even understand really why women like guys genitalia. I don't get it. I'm like, why do you like that? It doesn't make sense to me at all. I'm like, why? What is appealing about it? It just looks like a sack of potatoes and wizened and with a thing stuck between it. It just like really doesn't appeal to me at all. Like if a guy has got a shirt on and he's got like a short dark hair, like Indian hair, or even I like short spiky hair, that type of look, and clean shaven skinny guy, that like I really like that look because aesthetically it looks gorgeous to me. But if someone starts to take their clothes off, like it's like, okay, that's a body now. I think you look damn hot and asexy, or sexy, even if you want to call it. I call it asexy because I'm not sexually attracted to them, but I guess they are hot and sexy. But I like it in the aesthetic term, not in the sense of like genitalia term. I just don't like that. And after 2013, I knew then there was something different about me, and I found out I was asexual, am asexual in 2014, because I just couldn't bring myself to have sex ever again. I think the reason I liked it with the ex, I don't know, is because I really did love him at loads. Like he was my world at the time. And not only that, I think it was because in the end, he was abusive in every other way, but sexually. And so I liked that time with him sexually because it was a time when he was different. When he had sex with me, he was so caring, kind, thoughtful, considerate, all the qualities that I like that he was not the rest of the time. It was really weird. I'm glad he was like that because I'm glad I didn't have any sexual abuse from him and I had the opposite. So I had a good experience sexually with him, which might surprise you, but I did have a really good experience. I would say the majority of the time, because obviously, like in terms of actually doing it, it was good. But I found out in the end he was cheating on me, so that was, that wasn't so nice finding that out. Um, but and he split up with me because yeah, it gets a bit complicated. But basically, I left him to decide he wants to be with me more, even though he cheated on me. That's because we split up before and he stalked me and I didn't want that again. That's to cut a long story short. Um, so anyway, I'm so glad that person's out of my life. That's 2011 and that's the last time I ever had sex. So I've been sex free now and happy since 2023. Since 2011 to 2023, where we are now, right? We're in 2023 now. And I'm just so happy I've been sex free all this time. Like, I'm really happy. You can see it on my face. Look at my face is beaming, yay. But with him, we didn't have sex very often. Like, we would have it like we would go 2 3 months without having it. So that really was good for me in that way. I'm like, yay. And he would do other stuff like kissing and touching, which I much preferred. Nowadays I'm more into kissing than touching. And only touching the shoulders and stuff, really. I'm okay touching a guy's chest if they're naked, but I'm at the moment I'm not into that with me. So that's very difficult when you're asexual. So anyway, going back to family and friends, like I said, some people just won't get it. And this particular friend, like she accepts it more now. She just still doesn't really understand it because asexuality is a sexual orientation. It's not when you're abstaining for a period of time or you're not having sex for some reason for a period of time. That's not asexuality. And so, you have to be aware of these things. But if the person's not being malicious to you, they're not trying to go out their way to prove your asexuality isn't real, they're not telling you you're not asexual, they're not being malicious, then, you have to see how you feel and if you can accept that or not about them, and you have to see whether you feel they're invalidating you. So if you've got friends who are constantly going on about you being asexual in a negative way, they're constantly trying to disprove you're asexual, they're constantly putting you down about asexuality, they're saying it's not real, or any of these type of things, and you speak to them about what they're saying to you and how hurtful it is and how you feel invalidated by them, and you have a genuine conversations with them and allow them to correct the behavior. So if there's any problem you have with someone, ideally, depends on the severity of what they're saying, but ideally if you've been friends with the person quite a while, for example, you usually have to give the person, to be fair to them and the relationship and friendship, the opportunity to put something right. So you would tell them how you feel and explain how their behavior, so you're not saying you're a horrible person, I hate you. You'd be saying stuff like, okay, so when you say to me, I don't believe you're asexual, you'd say to them, when you say the words to me, I don't believe you're asexual, say to them, that hurts my feelings because it makes me feel invalidated and not accepted for who I am. Healthy friendships and relationships are based on each person in the friendship or relationship holding a safe space for that person to discuss their thoughts, feelings, and emotions with you without being judged. Without being judged, right? It doesn't mean to say the person's not judging you, because as human beings, we kind of automatically, a lot of the time, will judge in our heads what we think of that, whether we agree with it or not, and we will kind of sometimes respond involuntary. Sometimes we have to take time out to reflect. But in general, you should be holding a safe space for each other. So if you can't go to that person and say, I'm asexual, and feel comfortable around them and okay being yourself around them, then something is wrong. If you haven't spoken up and told them how you feel, then they're not to know. They should know, you could argue, that their behavior is bad, but people are not mind readers and they're very set in their ways. And, you need to actually bring to their attention what's not good for you and what's not helping you. And if you're feeling like unsafe around this person to the point where, you just feel you can't talk to them, then it's probably meaning that you'll have to let go of that friendship or relationship because it isn't going to be healthy for you and it's not going to be healthy for them if you're not able to show the true you to them, if you know what I mean. Because like healthy relationships and friendships are based on both people being able to speak up about who they are. But obviously if you got someone who's like, on your case going, you're not asexual, I don't believe you, stop talking about it, blah, blah, blah. You need to either limit your time with this person, if it's a family member, for example, and you live with them, which is really tough. It's one of the toughest situations to be in, or either limit the time with a friend or get them out of your life. If a person is all they're doing is making you feel bad, making you feel negative, putting you down, making you feel like shit, then you have to let them go. There has to be a point where you can't keep that friendship or relationship going if that's all you're getting. Like I said, like say you've been friends with someone for quite a long time, 1 or 2 years or that type of thing or more, and they haven't been bad with you before. Really, they're quite open-minded. They listen to you, they accept you, they'll ask you questions, because if someone's asking you questions, it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing, because they're taking interest in you, what you do, what you're like, and they're trying to understand you better. Some people, don't understand unless they ask questions and are allowed to feel safe, and you provide safe space for them to ask the questions without them fearing and worrying about what you're going to say back and getting defensive. Then they're not going to feel that you're approachable, and this is how things can go wrong in relationships and friendships, right? Both people have to be able to communicate, not avoid things all the time, but communicate. And sometimes it's really hard, because if you've got someone who's difficult to speak to, or they're sensitive in certain ways, it's hard, because if you're an empath person, for example, an empathetic person, then you do worry more about what the other person feels and you don't want to upset them. But being who you are in terms of your asexuality is not something that should upset someone else. It's something that they should embrace, because it's a part of you. And if they like you and love you, then they need to like and love that part of you, because it's a major part of who you are. It's your sexual orientation. Some people in life will be friends with you for years and years and years, and other people they will change their opinion of you, they will change their values in their own life, they will go their separate ways from you, and sometimes you just can't salvage that friendship or relationship. You have to let that person go, because you're swimming in different directions. And it might be that the time when you realize you're asexual is the start of that. It's the catalyst for that person thinking, well, I don't understand this person anymore, because I thought they were heterosexual, but they're not. So where does that leave me? It makes them question things, right? I'm trying to be like as fair as possible for asexuals, and also in terms of pointing out what a healthy relationship and friendship looks like. And it is sad if someone doesn't accept us for who we are. It's damn sad, especially if you've known this person a long time. And I have people in my asexual groups are like, I've been friends with this person for 2 years. I've come out as asexual, and now they're just not very nice to me, or they don't want to accept it. They're putting me down. And there comes a point when you have to leave that situation. If you've talked to them, give them a chance to correct their behavior, and they're still not listening, and they're still not being nice to you, because otherwise you'll just build resentment, you'll build anger and frustration, till eventually something will happen that splits you two up anyway. And so, but it requires two people. They need to share their feelings on how it affects them, and you need to share your feelings. So if you're in a relationship, for example, or with a family member, the ideal scenario is where you sit down and talk to them. But we all know that some people can just fly off the handle, and you can't always do that. But if they're not a fly off the handle type of person, if they're willing to listen, You can say, look, I want to let you know that I'm not actually heterosexual. If that's what you thought you were, you might think you're bisexual or lesbian or something else, right? But if you, whatever sexuality you thought you were, that your parents thought you are, or any family members, like I thought I was heterosexual for years. Well, I've actually discovered I'm not, and I'm asexual. And I know this might be a bit shocking for you, but I've discovered this about myself. It's made me really happy because I now understand myself better. I understand why I am the way I am. I feel closer to my own my own personal identity. It's helped me a lot to understand myself better. When I had loads of questions, I felt very different to other people in life, and it really makes good sense to me. And so, I know like most people like sex, but I'm just not into that, if that's how you feel. And I just wanted to let you know because it's something I'm going to start talking about from now on, and it's going to be probably a bigger part of my life. And I just wanted you to know about it. And if you've got any questions, just ask me. But obviously, when you're first discovering you're asexual, you can be quite weak in how you come across. I was, because I wasn't knowing for definite at the very, very beginning that I'm asexual. I'm like, this sounds like me, but I need to do some research. So I would say, first of all, when you first discover it, give yourself a bit of time to come to terms with it yourself and to actually try and find out what type of asexual you are, so you've got some type of solid structure to your asexuality. One thing that's really good to do is to build evidence. What do I mean by this? Build evidence that asexuals exist, that asexuality is a real thing, that there are thousands of asexuals around the globe, right? So you've probably got some time in your day, if not, set time aside, right? And half an hour, right? Put it on your calendar, in your diary, put it on your appointment maker, put it on your calendar if you've got like a digital calendar. Set some time aside and say, this is like the half an hour or an hour that I'm going to write my evidence for asexuality list, right? So what you need to do is then Google and find out all the like YouTube channels with asexuality on them, all the merchandise on Amazon, Redbubble. I've got my own shops, and I've got my own shops on both of them. If you didn't know, well, kind of like a shop on Redbubble, and then it's like a page on Amazon. So I sell my own asexualized merchandise. Um, books. Obviously, I've got my Asexual Perspectives book. If you didn't already know, you can go to my page and see this on Amazon. Just type in Asexual Perspectives. So look at all the different books on asexuality, the merchandise, different groups on Facebook, and just make links to all these things, right? And so if someone says to you, asexuality is not a real thing, love, it doesn't exist, it's just in your mind, right? You can go to this list and you can say to them, this is all the different things for asexuals. This is not a limited list. And you can go, obviously, Facebook list groups for asexuals on Facebook, get the URL link. You know how to do that, right? You go to the actual Facebook group, the top of the link. You don't have to like be in it. You can click the link in the search bar of the actual group and you can list these. Asexuality.org, biggest online forum for asexuals, put that in there. Any articles, Google like asexuality articles that have been in the newspapers, been on the news, Sky News, this type of thing, and just make a whole list. And this is your evidence list that you keep. And whenever someone says to you, asexuality is not a real thing, it doesn't exist, bring out this list and say all these like hundreds and thousands of people that are asexual, you're saying they don't exist. This is proof they exist, right? If they won't go and actually look at them because they're just so ignorant, they want to think that it's not true, then that's their problem. You can't force someone to look at the links. You can't make someone believe that asexuality is real, even though it is real. All you can do is keep talking about asexuality, keep being your asexual self. This is why it's so important to be confident about your asexuality. It's so important to say you're asexual and mean it. You don't want to live a life, right, where 5-10 years time people still don't know you're asexual and you having to hide this all the time, hide it from family and friends. It's better to be out, even if they don't accept you, in my personal opinion, than it is to live a life where you're in secret all the time, hiding who you truly are, not being your authentic self. Because then you'll end up with friends and people who don't even know you, and that they're basing their friendship with you on something that they don't even know about you, which is fundamental to who you are. Sexuality is fundamental to who you are. Do you know what I mean? It's not the be all and end all of you, but it is a fundamental part of you because it affects you in different ways. So, for example, if you've got friends who love watching sex stuff and talk about sex all the time, and you're a sex repulsed asexual, and you're being secretive about it, and they're like, "Oh, come on, watch this movie with us, me and the girls," right? And you're having to sit through what, a 2.5, 3 hour movie that's got loads of sex scenes in it, and you feel so uncomfortable, but you don't want to say anything. That's just not being true to who you are. And really, maybe those friends aren't actually going to be your friends in the future because they're not actually your type of people. Or maybe they will still be, but they just didn't realize that's offensive to you. And so they'll invite you around for a Disney movie another time, or a superhero movie, some movie that doesn't have sex in it. Go to my no sex movie review playlist if you don't know films that have got no sex in them, because there's tons with no sex in them. I review them. So yeah. So this is what you need to do. Compile evidence in favor of asexuality. This is proof that you are actually asexual, that thousands of asexuals exist. They wouldn't produce merchandise for asexuals if people weren't buying it. They go out of business. They wouldn't produce books for asexuals if people weren't buying them. If there was no audience for them, if there was no people that was asexual, they wouldn't have websites and YouTube and asexuality.org if people that are asexual didn't really exist. They wouldn't have asexual meetups. They wouldn't have asexual groups on Facebook if these people didn't exist. Right? So you build your case of evidence to prove, not that you should have to prove who you are, but it does help if you need it. And it also educates people as well at the same time. But at the end of the day, if they don't accept you for who you are, that is their problem. And you might have to walk away from the friendship or relationship. If, however, it's a family member and you live with them, it's hard because you can't walk away from them very easily. You have to go to your room, go out with friends if they'll let you. It depends how strict your parents are, right? Some parents don't let their kids out until a certain age, or even if they're a certain age, an adult, they want them back by a certain time. Like, I can't ever live with my parents again. But, even when I was like living with them, my mum will like go to bed at like 10:30, 11 o'clock at the latest. And so that's really difficult for me. Like, couldn't have people over later than that. Do you know what I mean? Like, or they had to leave about 9 or something to make sure, because my parents are different generation to me, older than me, different lifestyle. Do you know what I mean? So if you are, like, if you're the type of person who, like, has people that are unsupportive and you're kind of very attached to those people, it's not great. So what I would suggest is to try and make other friends, especially in the asexual community, because it's better to have people who understand you, because at least you feel some support there, even if you're not getting it at home, not getting it from your family and stuff. If you have like people online you can talk to, even in comments on YouTube channels. I mean, I've got a great community here, that's really supportive. If I get really any bad comments, the majority I delete. It depends how bad they are. I had someone being really rude on one of my posts. So someone emailed me and they said that they were in the news and they're talking about Pride because it's Pride Month, right? So I posted that and then someone was horrible in a comment. I haven't kept that on there. I've deleted it and blocked the person. I don't want people being horrible to people in my community when there's no need for it. And they're obviously clearly against Pride months from the thing they posted. So it was just like an emoji that was bleh, basically, and it wasn't nice. So I've removed that and comment, and I've actually hidden the user on my channel because I don't want people like that upsetting my community. So I will block people who are really nasty like that. So build the evidence, state your case, educate people about asexuality. But at the end of the day, if they don't accept it, and you've got a friend that they find out you're asexual and they just can't accept it, you usually have to part ways, because sometimes you can change yourself in life, or you can find out something about yourself in life that just doesn't gel with the other person anymore. It goes against what they believe, it goes against their values, it goes against their comfortability, it goes against what they're happy with. And as we develop and grow as people, and as we go on our own journey in life, sometimes you just conflict so much with the other person that it's better to part ways, because it's healthier for both of you, right? And so while that might be really sad and difficult to hear, sometimes that's what you need to do and move on. When I was first having in relationships and stuff like that, I just thought, like, the first guy I ever thought I loved when I was 16, I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with him and everything would be like fro smelling of roses, if you know what I mean. It wasn't the case. And so yeah, it wasn't the case at all. And I didn't know I was asexual back then either. So I have not actually had an asexual proper relationship. There was a guy online years ago, but I don't really call that a proper relationship because I never met the guy. And so yeah, I know how hard it can be, even though my parents accepted it, but two of my friends didn't, and it took them a year to accept it in work, and one of them was gay. And I think that's one of the hardest things, if you've got gay or lesbian or LGBT plus friends and they don't understand asexual and they can't accept it, because they're a minority sexual orientation too. And it's like, wow, you can't even accept that I'm a minority sexual orientation, but you are as well. Why can't you accept me for who I am when I accept you for who you are? But there's some people in LGBT plus community who just don't understand asexuality, because they are still sexually driven. They can't comprehend someone in their mind who doesn't want sex. It's unnatural to them. Some people, right? Other people are fine about it. I've got lesbian and gay friends that just accept it about me. But like, asexuals get very upset, or some asexuals get very upset, that they go in LGBT plus groups and they're not accepted in them, and they're not even given a good atmosphere. The people aren't very receptive to it, and this is because LGBT plus, there's still a lot of highly sexual people in there. I saw part of Pride years ago when I was a speaker at the Asexuality conference in 2018. They had a Pride event going on. I didn't stop to watch the whole Pride event. I just saw little tiny bits. And, I was in a restaurant afterwards, and this woman's like standing on the table, taking her top off, flashing her bare breasts. Now, to me, if a heterosexual person did that, that wouldn't be acceptable and they'd be escorted out of the building. I personally don't see why someone from the LGBT plus community should get away with doing that, when heterosexuals would be basically told probably to get out, and the police might be called for being a flasher or something. You know what I mean? I don't think that's equality, right? And I don't personally like that. As an asexual person, I hated that. I'm like, I don't want to see nudity. I specifically came in here to relax with my friends, not to see bare naked chest of another woman, right? It just really put me off my food, and I hated it. I don't have a problem with her being lesbian, but I do have a problem with someone taking their top off and flashing their breasts in a restaurant. It's totally inappropriate. So a lot of the LGBT plus community, I find, in terms of pride events, they're very sexually driven. I'm not saying that's wrong because they're like that, but I don't think it's right to do that in public. When I said, like, heterosexuals, for example, wouldn't be allowed to do that. but but I don't think it's wrong being gay or lesbian. I just think that particular behavior wasn't good. But, like the gay guy I knew in work who couldn't accept I was asexual, he was very sexual. I mean, he would be having sex with different guys all the time, talking about stuff at the dinner table, like, or canteen table, I should say, talking about his sex life constantly. And that's why he couldn't understand and accept my asexuality, because he was so sexually driven. He couldn't understand how someone could possibly be asexual and not have the drive for sex, not have the want for sex, not have the urge for sex. Now, some asexuals will say they still have a drive for sex, but it's not aimed at anyone. So before I get someone saying, oh, well, asexuals can have a sex drive. But usually, if they've got a drive for the sex itself, it's not actually aimed at anyone. Pure asexuals usually don't have a need, urge, or want for partner sexual intercourse at all. And so, there's different types of asexuals, and obviously that's a different conversation. To just get someone to accept the fact you're asexual in the first place can be very difficult. It's good if you're able to share your feelings, but you don't have to go into depth about what type of asexual you are, how it is for you. All they need to know really is that you're asexual. If you don't feel comfortable about using the word asexual yet, then just say, I'm not interested in sex, because some family members, not my parents, but some family members I've seen online in forums, like their mum is like, oh, when are you gonna like go and hook up with guys then? Like, I'm worried about you because you haven't got a boyfriend yet and stuff like this. I personally find it very weird that mothers even want their daughters to hook up with anyone. Like, come on, the woman is not a piece of meat. Their daughter's not a piece of meat. Hooking up is like a sexual thing. It's like not much meaning in it. Like, but some mothers are encouraging their daughters to go and actually hook up. And like, oh, you'll get left behind, and they're trying to force them into relationships with really unhealthy heterosexual guys, for example, because the mother thinks it's strange their daughter isn't going around having sex. I think it's good if the daughter isn't that, even if they're not even if they're not asexual and they're heterosexual, for example. I don't think the mother should be encouraging them to just go and hook up with God knows who. There's a risk of AIDS, risk of other sexually transmitted infections and diseases, and a woman's body shouldn't be used for sex. A woman should have a lot of self-respect and value her worth, and like, not give in to pressure with guys just wanting sex, which a lot of them do through dating. They just literally want sex. I had a 18-year-old contact me on Badoo before I came on this stream. 18. The youngest I've dated is 21, right? And so he goes, I'm hoping I'm not too young for you. And I'm like, and I said, well, the youngest I've dated is 21. And I said, does your mum know that you like older women? And he's like, no. And I said, I'm not interested in a secret relationship. And I'm actually looking for a relationship, not, not a, basically not to date. I'm looking for an actual relationship. Right. So I said, and I'm asexual as well. And then he's like, oh, so you wouldn't have sex with me? I'm like, no. And he's like, oh, I said, yeah, so I'm not the right girl for you. So, he did explain that he has liked older women since being like 16. He was in a relationship with an older woman at 16, which I found interesting. He's like, don't judge me. But I'm glad that he knows what he likes. It's just a shame he obviously can't tell his mother at the moment. But I don't want a secret relationship. Like, I prefer guys who are 21 and upwards. Like, but yeah, I'm not into secret relationships. And there's so many guys on Badoo that are happy with my birth certificate age because I actually put it on there. I'm not interested in it, so I don't usually talk about it unless it's an interview I'm having. Some interviews like for the BBC and stuff like that, they want to know my birth certificate age, and so I just tell them because I'll help asexuals in that way, and it's part of the interview. But otherwise, I'm not interested in it, right? And so I do put my birth certificate age on Badoo dating site, which has an asexual category. So far, I've only come across 2 guys on there that are asexual. But clearly that guy didn't even take any notice of it, because he did say in the end, well, I do want sex. I'm like, I just get shocked that there's so many guys. It's not the first time I've had a guy who's like, I think I've had 19-year-olds like approach me on there. I don't know if I've had other 18-year-olds, but it's not the first time. Years ago, I got a 17-year-old approach me on an asexual dating app. But it's just like, really, that's going kind of like really too young. And so I the 17-year-old, I said I won't speak. I didn't want to speak to him even till he was 18, because I said I don't feel comfortable with that. I just didn't. I just feel it's not right. So yeah, but he wasn't right anyway. But I told him I didn't want to speak to him till he was 18. So, but I prefer 21 and up. I've only dated 21 and upwards. I know other people that are older than me. Well, I know one person older than me that's like snogged 18-year-old before and stuff. But yeah, so that's really interesting. But there's loads of younger guys that like older women, but they want to have sex with them. And it's very hard as an asexual to be an asexual cougar, if you like, and like younger guys, but not want sex, because a lot of younger guys do want sex. But Some people are like, why do you like younger guys then? Why aren't you going for older guys if you don't like sex? I'm like, because I'm not attracted to older guys. I can't force myself, just like people can't force themselves to not be asexual. You can't force yourself to like a different age group than you're actually attracted to, despite what the whole world might think. You know what I mean? I like younger guys. I don't usually get attracted to people anywhere near my birth certificate age. I'm never saying never, right? But I just don't usually. And the older someone gets, the more uncomfortable I feel about being in a relationship or dating scenario with them. But obviously, there's younger guys that do like older women. For example, the 18-year-old that approached me, and I don't think they'd be comfortable with a girl their own age, right? I've met guys who genuinely like an older girl and they're just not comfortable around people their own age. And I understand them because that's how I feel about being the older one. So there are guys out there that like older women and that are not attracted to girls of their own age. And there are older women that are attracted to younger guys not their own age. So they would be a good match. But trying to find that is kind of rare. And it's even more difficult when you're someone who's like me, who's asexual, because I get told, well, you know, like younger guys in their early 20s, that's when they want sex the most. And I'm like, but I know loads of older guys online. I don't know, like, I don't dive into that personally because I'm not interested, but I'm in dating groups, non-asexual dating groups, as well as asexual dating groups, and running asexual dating groups of my own. And I know guys that are 50 plus and they are really into sex. I mean, they're super into sex. And so, you know, it doesn't matter what age it is. If a guy likes sex, you know, it's up to him individually. And I haven't seen any difference. Actually, I have seen a difference. I've seen some younger guys who haven't had sex for years. So they're like, so their guy might be 28 and he's never had sex, for example. Or he might be 24 and never had sex. Whereas a guy who's in his 50s might have had a lot of sex in his life. And he might be like, you know, like wanting lots more. And so, you know, like I have seen that actually. I've seen some younger guys having sex, but I think it's more to do with circumstances, religion, like no sex before marriage. I think it's more to do with the fact they haven't had the opportunity. They live in a foreign country, then they come over to the UK, for example, and so they're not sexually experienced. So I think it's more circumstantial than the fact they could live without it, unfortunately. But obviously, if I have a guy come on a dating site and he's like, oh, well, I haven't had sex before, so I'll be fine without sex. It's like, really? Because a lot of these guys, they still want to try sex and have it later on, just they don't want it right now because their career is more important. They don't want to settle down, actually. So I'm an asexual person who is interested in a serious relationship with the right healthy guy, if I can find one that's suitable for me, and I don't want sex with them. And so that makes it really difficult. It might be that I never find the right guy for me and that I do remain single for the rest of my life, which is okay, right? It's a fact that might happen, and I am very comfortable in my own company a lot of the time. Um, but you know, I do have a strong romantic side to me. I do believe there is a guy out there for me somewhere. He's probably looking for me, thinking, God, I really like older girls. I'm asexual. I'm fed up with talking to girls the same age as me. There's so many young girls because there is a lot of young people in the asexual community, like early to mid 20s. So I get a lot of people in my groups, like older women and older guys, for example, in different groups, because there's not so many older people, but they're all like, oh, where are all the older people? Because they don't want to be in a relationship or date a younger person. And there's a lot of people, like even like 25 to 35 or 18 to 35, this age group, that's asexual. So they find it difficult because they don't want to be with someone who's younger. But I have the opposite. Like I like younger guys. So like I can't see me ever being happy in a relationship with an old, well, I can't even, it's cringeworthy to me because I'm not attracted. So, you know, just like a guy who is really into older women, properly into older women, not saying I like older women for the thrill of it, but it really needs to be with an older woman, you know, because they're not attracted to girls their own age. They just think that they want someone more mature. They want someone with more life experience. They want someone with more intelligence, if you like, someone who's not going to play games with them or mess them around. You know, they want someone who's older that just knows what they want and tells it like it is, rather than little girls that play games, you know. And so, you know, there is someone for everyone. But if you're in a, if you know, people have got to accept you up front, like with dating sites, right? in order to prevent the situation of what do you do if your friends or family, I should have said, or a relationship doesn't accept you for who you are. So if we expand on the title of this video and we think about relationships, you don't want to end up being in a relationship with a person who doesn't accept you for who you are. Obviously, you might be in a scenario where you're already in a relationship and you only found out you're asexual in that relationship, right? The hard, cold reality and truth is that person might not accept you for who you are and your asexuality. That's really hard to hear. It's not what you want to hear at all. It feels shit. I'm sorry. Doesn't mean to say they're not going to accept you, but you have to be true to who you are. You can't keep hiding and lying and who you are for the sake of a person. If a person doesn't love you for who you are now in this present moment, then they're not going to be able to be the right person for you. And that's really sad, right? But you need to be able to move on rather than stick in an unhealthy relationship. So, of course, your partner, when you explain to them, they might be able to accept your asexuality. They might be perfectly fine with it, really supportive because they care more about you as a person than they do about the sex. Maybe you're an asexual who's on the grey end of the asexual spectrum and you don't mind sex occasionally or as an activity to do. And so maybe it doesn't actually change the dynamic of your relationship that much. It just means you're a different identity, right? But if some people are very asexual adverse or LGBT plus adverse, then you might come up against difficulties because really you're a different identity to what they got with you as. Right? That isn't your fault. It isn't their fault. It's just the way it is. And so often in life, we might go through several different relationships or friendships before we actually find the right person, or maybe we will go through a number of them and never ever stick with a specific person in our life. I never used to think that way. I used to think, my God, I don't, that's not what I want, but it can happen. And letting go is difficult, but when you let go of the wrong person, the right person can come into your life. I'll say that again. When you let go of the wrong person or people, the right person or people can come into your life. So if you are still attached to someone who is like, say you're in a relationship with someone, you've been in a relationship 5 years, say, and you really care about the person, you really love the person, you want to spend your time with them, but you tell them you're asexual and you don't get a very good response. First of all, you do need to have a conversation with them. You don't just let them go and give up like that. You don't crawl away and feel like dying and not speaking to them and shut off and avoid the conversation, because that's just going to make things worse in your relationship, right? Sometimes that person might need time to reflect and come to terms with the fact you're asexual, right? So you maybe need to give them a bit of space and say, like, I know this is a lot to take in. I didn't realize this about myself when I got with you. And I know it might be a surprise to you, but I'm here for you. Ask me any questions you want. Ask me how it will affect our relationship. Tell me how you're feeling. Explain how you're thinking. But some type of people, they need time to reflect. And it's difficult because when they reflect, you don't know what their thoughts are. It might be positive, it might be negative, it might be angry, frustration, because they might think, oh, well, I got with this person, they're not who I thought they were anymore. And so they might feel disassociated from themselves or from you. They might feel like their head is in a spin. They might feel like they've lost direction in their life. They might think, oh my God, what's happened? Because this is like kind of emotions that run through someone's mind when someone in the relationship has brought to attention something that's changing the dynamic of that relationship. This can happen with friendships too, and it doesn't have to just be asexuality. It can happen with a variety of things, right? You might bring something new into your life that you then want to spend 3 days a week doing, but your best friend sees you those days. And they'll be like, you've seen me for 3 days a week for 5 years, and then all of a sudden or for 2 or 3 of those 5 years, and all of a sudden you're stopping it. Why? Aren't I enough for you? Don't you like me anymore? When are we supposed to spend time together? What's going to happen with that? Do you care about me anymore? All these thoughts will run through the other person's mind. And so you have to understand that people are coming from it from their own heads, their own point of view, from safeguarding themselves, and for actually, like, trying to understand the situation and make sense of everything. Because what they've known about you, if you weren't in their mind asexual when the relationship started, what they knew about you has in fact become blurred and maybe changed in some ways, because they're like, hang on a minute, we've been having sex for like 6 months in a row now, and you're telling me you're asexual? That doesn't make any sense to me. It's kind of contradictory. And so, you have to understand that all relationships are difficult. Wow, what sexual orientation you are, and there's difficulties on both sides, right? In a healthy relationship, there will still be insecurities. Um, Obviously, if someone's being really nasty to you, shouting at you, threatening you, get out of the situation. Just get out, seek help, call the Samaritans, call the police if your life's in danger. If someone's going to start throwing objects at you and shouting and screaming at you, get out, get help, go to a family member, a friend, get to a shelter, do what you can. If someone is volatile, they're not a healthy person, and you just can't feel safe around them or trust them, but you have come out as asexual, get some help, seek refuge, go where you can, get out of the situation. You don't want to be in that, right? There are probably some situations right now in the world, sadly, where the person has told them they're asexual, and that is being used against them as a manipulation tactic as well by a narcissist or abuser. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a licensed therapist. I have done basic counseling skills course, and obviously seek professional help, because these situations are very difficult. But what I would say is understand that just because you're asexual doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. Just because you're asexual doesn't mean to say you should be treated badly or made to feel insecure, like no one else will want you, no one else will care about you because you're asexual. Before I even discovered I was asexual, I had an ex, and he used to say, "You won't get anyone else. You won't get anyone else to love you." And this is what abusers and narcissists are like. They make you feel so small. They rip your self-esteem out of you. They lower your self-worth. They say things to make you question your own sanity and identity. And it's really difficult. And as asexuals, I think some of us have a vulnerability about ourselves because we are a minority sexual orientation. That does make us more vulnerable and susceptible to people kind of like twisting things and saying, oh, well, like making us feel less than we are because we're a smaller minority, like, oh, you won't get anyone else but me, and this type of thing. It does make us more subjected to that type of abuse. It makes us more like vulnerable to sexual abuse as well, and all these type of things, right? You have to be aware as well. I don't mean to say this to you, but I've known of a couple of people that have come into the asexual community and found out that they're actually pedophiles, and that is shocking and absolutely disgusting to me, that they're even posing themselves as asexual and pretending to be someone they're not. But it does happen. And I was absolutely shocked when I found this out. I couldn't believe it. Because the way these people talk, well, the way one of them talked, not the other one, but the way one of them talked, you know, he made out that he doesn't like sex and he wasn't interested in it. But one of the last conversations, he actually used to come to my meetups as well, which is even worse. Used to, quite a while ago now. But anyway, and he was talking about like having sex with someone, and I'm like, and yet he was not comfortable with the fact that I can kiss guys in nightclubs. So that was like strange. Um, it's kissing guys in nightclubs, not having sex with them. But anyway, so yeah, I found it was strange that said he didn't like sex and then was actually in a relationship having it, because he said he wasn't an asexual that wasn't interested in that at one point. But I guess the story can change. Anyway, I'm not going to go into that. I don't think it's right to continue that conversation. But anyway, I just wanted to point it out that there are people that are not good coming into our community pretending to be asexual who are not. So while asexuality is valid, there are thousands of real, genuine asexuals in the world. There are still people infiltrating our community who are not actually asexual, and they're using it to cover up stuff that's not good. I had to do that as a side note because I want to be honest with you. right? So there are people who are abusive, and there are people in the world that are narcissistic, and this, just because we're asexual doesn't mean to say we're any less susceptible to these people. In fact, I'd say in some ways we are more, because of the fact that we're not usually accepted a lot by people in society, and that can be seen as a weakness. So guys can come in, or whatever gender can come in my case, guys, and they can make you feel like, oh, you got to be in a relationship with me because you're not going to get anyone else, are you? I've even had guys say stuff like that to me a long time ago on Facebook dating. Oh, I'll be your boyfriend. Like, you're not likely to get anyone else. Like, I'm not interested, right? It's much better to be single for the rest of your life. Yes, forever, and be happy being single, than it is to be with these abusive, narcissistic people who make you feel like you can't get anyone else. You don't actually need to be in a relationship to be happy, to feel content, to live your life to the fullest, to the max. If you watch the videos on my channel, I like to show you my asexual life that is good, right? I went to Disneyland Paris, went to the like a subsidiary Bristol Zoo the other day. It's actually owned by Bristol Zoo, but it's called Wild Place. But the whole lot of animals are moving over from the original Bristol Zoo to there soon. And I go out to like different events and stuff. I have a really good asexual life. I really enjoy my life. Is everything good? No. Sometimes things are pretty difficult, right? But overall, I have a great asexual life, and I don't think the issues with the time when it's not good is because I don't have a boyfriend or partner. I actually think it would probably be worse if I had someone right now. I've actually just employed a therapist for myself. This person's not just a normal therapist, they're a therapist, a mentor, a coach, and they're like a spiritual person, intuitive. So they work in different modalities. So they're not a traditional therapist. It took me quite a long time to find this person. So I've just started working with her, and I'm going to be working through trauma from my past, which is going to be hard for me, but I think it's absolutely necessary for me to be able to progress in my life, to work through some of this stuff that I have got from my past that might be holding me back right now. So this is a very good thing. So, if you are having, I'm not talking about, I told her I'm asexual on my mission, and she's like, thinks it's great, right? So it's good to get a therapist that is supportive of your asexuality, not someone who's invalidating because it's not going to work with them, right? I've only had like initial phone chat and then an initial session with her yesterday, right? So for 50 minutes. So that's like my first initial session that I got I've got the same type of thing next time. So I'll be seeing her every 2 weeks for some time to work through that. So seeing a therapist, if you've got stuff that's happened in your childhood or teens or adulthood, if you've been in the past with abusers, narcissists, this type of thing, it's very good as part of your healing process to find the right therapist for you that can help you through your trauma. Like, I tried to get trauma therapy on the NHS and it wasn't suitable for me. It was CBT, which I have done before, but they're not trained specifically in trauma therapy. And so they were no good for me. They actually were going to make the thing worse. They were triggering me more. And so you can say that you're going to be triggered before you get better, but the thing that they were advising is completely wrong. I know this from all the other previous training I've had and experience I've got in life and the skills I've learned, that what they were saying is wrong. So I told them blatantly it's wrong. I tried to get a second opinion for that place. It's the same thing. I'm like, I'm not doing this. You're giving completely the wrong advice out. It's not good. Right? Because they were basically saying if someone says words that is true, but it's not, right? So in past relationships, for example, I'll give you an example. So in the relationship also for that person for a very long time, who I loved implicitly, right? He used to say he loved me, right? But his actions were very abusive, apart from sexually, right? So if we take that, he's saying he loves me time and time again, but yet he's showing the opposite. He's swearing at me, shouting at me, pinning me up against objects, coming up in my face like he's about to hurt me, and all this type of thing that I will refrain from going into because I know it's going to be triggering for people. But do you know what I mean? That's not love. That is abuse, right? He might have some sort of toxic love towards me, but it's not actually proper healthy love, which is what you want. So, when therapists are teaching, oh, like, oh, the part you need to heal and you're not healing because you didn't feel loved is like a load of rubbish. It's not the fact, it's a fact that that isn't love, right? I'm just using that example. It wasn't exactly the example I gave to the therapist, but I don't want to go into personal details. And I'm trying to give you an example so you can understand what I mean. But I said that what they were talking about, I wrote an email to them saying it's like the equivalent of this, that I had an ex who told me he loved me, yet he was abusive to me. But because he said he loved me, and in the name of love, I stayed with him because I believed he loved me. So because he kept saying, "I love you," and I wanted to be loved so much because I obviously had issues of attachment and didn't have self-love back then. And obviously, when you're with someone abusive, they make you so you think that you can't be lovable to anyone else. Then it doesn't matter what the person says. If they're not showing they love you, words don't mean it. Right, but I hung on to the fact that he said he loved me, and the way he was in the beginning was really nice for the first few weeks or whatever. I was friends with this guy for 8 months before I got in a relationship with him, and the 8 months were great, right? Massaged my feet, cooked for me, and all sorts. Then he changed when we moved in together, just to give you some backstory on that. Um, and so, it doesn't matter what someone says to you. And if someone's trying to, CBT is to change thought patterns. And if someone's trying to change my thought pattern to every time someone says they love me, they actually do love me, despite their behavior, that is wrong. That is such bad. I'm not a therapist. I have done a life coaching weekend course, but I'm not a fully qualified coach. I'm a coach from experience. But if someone's telling me that, I know it's a pile of shit. Excuse my language, but it is, right? So I am willing, because I have self-awareness and I am strong in my character, thank God, to tell that person they're wrong, to tell an actual company, NHS company, who I've had therapy with before, I might add, that they're giving the wrong information out. This is actually wrong. I told them twice because they had two therapists saying the same thing. And I'm like, this shouldn't be what you're teaching. So, it's kind of hard to find a therapist. So that was no good. So I had to give up hope on the NHS. And then there's another, the doctor said I would have to specific trauma therapy on the NHS. I'd have to wait for 2 years. And the place they recommended I have to have that is the place that I just can't, told you about, which I can't have therapy with them anyway. And the type of therapy they were talking about didn't even seem what would interest me or be work for me anyway. So, and they said they hadn't got that facility at the moment. So it's very confusing. But at the end of the day, they're not teaching the right stuff. So I've had to pay privately. I did get some benefits like for disability to pay for that type of thing, but a lot of it like goes on cost of living these days, doesn't it? Just to survive, with all the prices going up. But yeah, so I'm paying to see someone every fortnight because I think it's going to be more affordable. It is quite like stretching my money, but I think it's essential that I get these issues sorted out as much as possible. It might take years though. I've got years of different types of trauma. I've had pretty much every type: physical, emotional, mental, sexual. I'm not asexual because I've had sexual trauma, because I had the good sex with the last guy for years. I was with him for 8.5 years in total, and we did have sex throughout that whole time. And I had the abuse before then. So, and I wouldn't say I'm traumatized by the sexual stuff, really, which might sound weird to you, but I just put them down to bad incidents in my life. So I don't really feel the trauma from that. I've got more trauma to do with childhood stuff, and things like that, really. So, but it's good. Like, if I want to get a guy who's healthy in a relationship in the future, then I need to better myself and work through some trauma stuff to make sure that I'm making myself a healthier person for myself first and foremost, and then make it healthier for me to be in a relationship with someone else, healthier for them and healthier for me. So therapy is not to be frowned upon. It's not to be seen as something that means you got something terribly wrong with you, and you're mental, like as in mentally retarded or some horrible type of stuff like that some people say. Getting therapy is actually taking charge of your own mental health, which in turn will help your physical health and will help you in your whole entire life. Getting a good therapist. Obviously, I'm new to working with her, so I'm not quite sure how it's going to go yet. But I think I chose her out of a lot of therapists because I thought she can bring coaching, mentoring into the therapy sessions, a spiritual element. So she's not just a therapist. She's got like she does therapy, but she's got like her own more spiritual kind of therapy business as well. So I think she comes with a range of background of skills for over 10 years that I can learn from. It's going to be challenging, I think, because whenever you revisit trauma, it's not helpful initially in some ways, but I had to write out an application form for her. Well, it wasn't an application form exactly. I had a 15-minute chat with her, and it's like, fill in this form about your questionnaire. And she's like, oh, have you had any trauma? Have you had any previous counselling and therapy? I started therapy, well, counselling, if you like, at 17 years old when I was in college. And so off and on, I've had therapy and counselling throughout my life because I've got an anxiety condition. I did speak to her about that because I had pre-birth trauma because I was a distressed baby before I came out. From my research, that's hardwired into your DNA, the anxiety. So I haven't found an article yet that says that can be reversed. So I might always have an anxiety condition because it's before I was born, before I came into the world. It was very traumatic for me. So, I might not be ever fully healed in the sense of like, and I might always likely have an anxiety condition of some sort. But if I can lower that anxiety, if I can work through some of the difficulties that are cropping up now sometimes because of past stuff, then I think it's only going to be helpful. And I see getting this therapy as a way to help more people on this channel because I know more techniques to help myself and how to work through things if I become a healthier individual for myself and I know how to process things better, then I'm only going to be able to help you more on this channel, with my expertise, because I feel like I'll be learning more skills from this person that then I can use for the rest of my life. So I think it's more of an investment than a cost, if you know what I mean. And that's the way I look at my education. That's the way I look at any online courses I buy, that it's an investment in myself, my own health, my own well-being, to further myself in my progression and growth in life. I think the people who don't get therapy are the ones that have got issues, which a lot of us have, that don't ever get that therapy are the ones that actually you need to watch and worry about the most, because they're saying, oh, I'm perfect, there's nothing wrong with me, when clearly there is something wrong with them. Maybe they're arrogant, maybe they're judgmental, maybe they criticize you, maybe they put you down, maybe they belittle you, and they don't see a problem with that, which is even worse, right? And so they might think everyone else is a problem and not see they have actually got a problem. I'm not saying they haven't had problems in their life and not been treated well, but they might also have problems themselves that they're not addressing, right? I want to make sure that when I have problems come up in my life, that I always like reflect, like, how much of this problem is because of the way I am, how much of this problem is because of the way the other person is, like, and can we meet in the middle? Can we, or is it just a case of no one's right, no one's wrong, we just need to part ways because we're not suitable anymore? But getting therapy is very good. Like, if you're in a family dynamic which doesn't accept your asexuality, that can be really hard. So if you get a good quality therapist that actually understands asexuality and accepts it, then that can really help you. Of course, I had the situation where I had a counselor back in 2014 when I found out I was asexual. Well, I was discovering I was asexual. And I said to her, I think, that I went to her for the fact that I couldn't have sex anymore. I just wanted the kissing and the holding hands and romance. And I was horrified. She said to me, I would have to have sex in order to keep a good guy. I mean, I was absolutely horrified and disgusted. And it's the worst thing she could have possibly said. And that did put me off counselling and therapy, to be quite honest with you. And when I told her about asexuality, she didn't even look it up. So, that wasn't a good counsellor or therapist. But there are people out there. There's more therapists now coming coming online who have got more expertise in asexuality, who do understand asexuality. Some asexuals themselves are becoming therapists. So, there are more avenues you can explore. So if you have got a family dynamic and they're really not being good with you, they don't understand your asexuality, sometimes we do go quiet if we live with our family because we feel they're going to shout at us and swear at us and stuff like this. And if you're in a situation like that right now and they don't accept your asexuality, I would say, you need to make a plan of being able to, like, when you're the age you can leave, to leave. You might think it's better to stay with your parents because you're saving money, but you're losing yourself in the process, right? So I would encourage you to move out, which is really scary. Move out if you're having problems with your parents or your guardians, whoever look after you, and you're old enough to live on your own. Go and live on your own. You do not want to be in a family dynamic where they don't accept your asexuality. They're shouting at you about it. They're screaming at you about it. They're getting aggressive about it, and they're just making you feel crap about it, right? You need to find people and a safe space for you to live in. If you're not safe in your own home environment, you'll always be on edge. You'll develop an anxiety condition, and that is going to play out years and years later throughout your life. So do something about it now. Take some action. Like find somewhere to live. Sometimes we think there's nowhere we could possibly afford, right? And it's really difficult. Places are really expensive these days, but there can be a golden opportunity if you just keep looking. Make your full-time job, if you like, outside of work if you've got a job, to actually go and find a place to live on your own. Get the help from the council, get help from other organisations, right? They can get you a safe place to live by yourself. They can get you out of that situation, because if you're in a very oppressive situation like that, it's going to do you no good. It's going to be really unhealthy. You're going to lose your whole sense of identity. You're going to be disassociated from yourself. You're going to have unhealthy emotions. You're going to have a lot of mental illness. You're going to have a lot of physical problems, because mental health affects physical health, and it's not going to be very good for you, right? So make a plan, right? If you're 15 and you still live at home with your parents, for example, in the UK, and you can't actually leave till you're older, then make your plan now. Like, look at different organizations, look at places. I mean, is there a family member you could go live with as your guardian if things at home are that bad? Is there an aunt, an uncle, a grandma, a granddad that will let you go and live with them, right? So you could still attend school or whatever you need to do, right? If things are that bad, would that be acceptable? Would your parents accept that, right? If you live with your parents but you can go to another relative, if you've got parents that don't accept your asexuality, look things up, make a plan. Never think you can't do something, because it's usually a way out, but it can be very difficult sometimes. But if you've got family that doesn't accept it, it doesn't matter how much you say to them, and educate them. All you can do is be yourself, right? So my best advice is, if your life is not in danger, then just be your asexual self, right? Talk about asexuality, talk about the people, like say, oh, I speak to my asexual friends online, I go to asexual meetups, I read asexual blogs. Talk about asexuality for them to get familiar with it, so it becomes more normal to them. This is what I did for like a year before 2 friends in work would accept it. I just kept talking about asexuality pretty much whenever I saw them. Like, oh, how are you? Oh yeah, I'm great, thanks. Like, I went to an asexual meetup the other day, or well, in my case, I organized an asexual meetup and it was great. And like, oh, there's loads of people I'm talking to on asexuality.org now, or there's loads of asexuals in my groups. Yeah, it's really nice that people understand me. And I would just make a point all the time of talking about it, so it becomes more normal to them. They understand that I'm going to talk about asexuality, that I'm going to be proud to be asexual, and that I'm actually I'm making it more normal for them by talking about it all the time. If we shy away and we just mention it once or twice, that's not actually helping us in our life, and it's not going to help them to come to terms with it. They're just going to think that it's a phase. If you're just saying it, and they're just going to think, all right, they told me they're asexual and now I'm just not talking about it with them and we forgot about it, and it's just a phase. But if you talk about asexuality and you keep being yourself, like I said, if you're in danger, get help. This is not for people who are in danger and going to get smacked in the head or anything for being asexual. I'm not talking about those scenarios, right? Those scenarios, you get help. You get out of that situation, get help from organizations like Shelter, talk to the Samaritans, get the police involved if you need to, go to the council, see what you can do, contact different organizations, right? If your life is in danger, we don't want that, right? Seek professional therapy, go to your doctors, tell them what's happening at home, do these type of thing, right? But if you're not threatened, maybe people are just making comments like, oh, I don't believe you and stuff like that, and they've just been flippant and offhand, then it's not for you to convince them otherwise. It's for you to carry on being asexual, talk about asexuality as part of your everyday life. If they don't like it, that's their problem. It's not your problem, right? Your sexual orientation of asexuality is non-negotiable, and you need to come from that point in life. Be strong in your asexuality, know that it's non-negotiable. It doesn't matter what they say, they can't change your sexual identity. No one can change my sexual identity. Some people can tell me blue on the face I'm not asexual, and I know it's totally untrue. I know myself better than anyone. I know 100% I'm asexual. It's absolutely obvious to me since being a child that I was born asexual but didn't realize it. There's so many things looking back. Like, I just, like, from 6 years old, I was in a boyfriend girlfriend relationship at 6 years old, a heterosexual guy. I love passionate kissing with him at 6 years old. Yes, very young. And he wanted to do sexual exploration, and I hated it. I felt completely invaded. And that bugged me for years. I felt so guilty about it. And it was horrible. Really bad experience because I wasn't interested in that type of thing. And, and when I was like kind of 14, 15 years old, for example, all I would think about doing is like, I would think about a guy I was really attracted to, for example. I would think like walk near his home, for example. And I would think, I didn't actually know exactly where he lived. I just knew the area. And I'd be like, oh, I would think about like, like if I ended up in a relationship with him, like kissing him and holding his hand and stuff like that. And the guys that I was in relationship with as teenagers, I guess I was a bit more um I was more into sexual touching when I was 14, 15, which might sound weird to you, considering I don't like that type of thing when I was like 6. But that would be where it ended. I never ever thought, oh, about sex. I didn't even think about it in my head. It didn't even compute. I never thought about like me having sex ever. So if a guy would like kiss me and touch me, I would get excited about that. But nowadays, I don't. I'm really turned off by the thought of a guy touching me in certain places. I'm like, these are my boundaries. Like, don't touch me here or there. But back then, I used to like that. And so I'm not saying I would never change again on that, but at the moment, I'm never changing again on that as far as I can tell. But, I don't know. I did like touching for quite a while. So it's possible I could change on that again. Possible, because I did actually like some of that. But I preferred a guy touching me to me touching him. And I think I would still prefer that if I was doing that. That might sound really weird, but it's true. But I know in the asexual community, there are some people that like to touch the bodies of another person, but not to have them be touched themselves, and vice versa. So I do know that is true. So you might find someone in a relationship where they enjoy touching you and your body, but they don't want to be touched back. So you might actually find someone who's compatible in that way with you, if you know what I mean. So yeah, so I remember I was 15, I liked that kissing and touching, like, it felt exciting and warm and thrilling at the time, and I really liked that, and I really loved the whole thing about that. I still look back at it and think I really like it, but at that time and now, I never think about sex in that way. To me, it's just touching and kissing, and that's kind of like a teenager style thing to do. Back then I was like 15, 14, 15. So, but I used to have quite a lot of relationships. I went from one relationship to another, like in my teens and throughout my teens, and then later on as well. But I've had 2 long-term relationships in my life. So, but yeah, so you have to understand that some people will never ever accept your asexuality. Other people take a long time to accept it. Maybe they partly do, maybe they never do. And we can't make someone change their mind or opinion, but they are more likely to change their mind and opinion if it's of their own free will and accord rather than us telling them what they need to believe. And if we be ourselves, our true authentic selves, and we talk about asexuality as it is in our life, we talk about it like it's normal, because it's important we normalize this, because at the end of the day, it's another sexual orientation that's genuine, right? And so the more we talk about it, the more we make it a normal part of our life, the more they'll accept it. I've come across asexuals that are like, oh, I told my mum and her reaction was really bad, and so she just doesn't talk about it again with me. And it's like, that person's not going to talk about it again with you if they're not comfortable about it, because they're not going to bring it up. They're going to try and shove it under the carpet. But that doesn't mean to say you have to stop talking about it, because you are who you are. And the less you talk about it, the less they'll believe it was true about you, or actually ask anything about it or get comfortable with it. They're not going to get comfortable with it if they don't know about it. It's like if you do anything in life and you do it repetitively, you get used to it. So if you repeat the fact you're asexual over and over again over a period of days, weeks, months, years, people are probably going to get used to it. Either that or you're going to repel the people that don't like it, and they're going to go from your life. Now, in terms of if your parents, and you might be very attached to your parents, you might be like, oh, I can't tell them because I don't want rejection. In life, we have to understand that we are going to get rejected even by our own family sometimes. And that might be harsh, but it's true. We have to have a degree of separation from ourselves and our parents and our families to know that we're individual adults when we become adults, and that we have our own opinions about things, our own views, and they might not match up. And we might grow further apart in that way. But don't forget, there's a whole world of family we can choose for ourselves out there. In other words, you can't choose your blood relatives, but you can choose who you have in your life, who you do resonate with, friends and people you come across. And that's just equally important. And it's good if we have a level of detachment from our parents and our families enough to be fulfilled and live a life on our own. Because if we don't and something happens to them, we are not going to be able to function on our own, right? We need to be in a position where we can function on our own without them for our own health and well-being, because they're not going to be around forever, unfortunately. That's going to be so sad, right? I love my parents to bits and I do not want anything to happen to them. The reality is I need to know that in future, and so do they need to know, that I can look after myself, which I can for years anyway, because I need to be able to do that, right? Because it's not going to be forever, is it? And so I don't want to talk about it. It's very sad. But what I'm trying to get at is some people are so attached to their parents and family, they feel they can't function on their own. It's actually not healthy. It's a very codependent thing. And so if something happens to family members, they can be absolutely distraught because they were so intertwined with them. And it's good to have a level and degree of separation and to understand that, you might not see eye to eye. Me and my parents are nearly completely different in the majority of ways. Doesn't mean to say I love them any less. Does it make things more difficult? Sometimes it makes things really difficult for us. But we're still family at the end of the day. I still like to go and see them and spend time with them. I still love them implicitly. Just I have to have a degree of awareness as an adult that we are completely different in the majority of ways. And that's hard. Because it's like, hang on, you're my parents. I'm supposed to be somewhat like you. Do you know what I mean? Like most people are somewhat like their parents. But I seem to be like the complete opposite the majority of time. They are honest in general though. So they've brought me up to be very, very honest because that's their morals they live by, which I'm very grateful for. I have honest parents. So that's something I really like about them. They buy me nice gifts as well for my birthday and stuff like that. But anyway, I digress. So yeah, what I'm saying is like you have to know that your family might not support you, agree with your asexuality, and you might have to, and it's healthy to get a life of your own, so that even if they don't accept it about you, you're not there being sad and upset all the time, constantly about it, because you've got other people in your life that do accept you for who you are. So in general, you should minimize the time you spend with people who don't accept you for who you are. Maximize the time you spend with other people who do accept you for who you are, but make sure you have some reflective time and comfortability to be in your own asexuality and to spend time on your own, getting used to it, getting comfortable with it, and getting stronger in it. Build relationships and friendships with people. Well, I say relationships, build friendships with people online, right? And ideally you want to build some friendships where you can meet up with some of these people in real life. You might have to travel. You probably will have to travel because it's unlikely that an asexual person will live in your city, or if they do, it might be that asexual person is very different to you. There's an asexual guy that lives in my city, for example, but we're very different. We did used to hang out sometimes, but it was noticeable that we end up being very, very different people, so that wasn't going to actually work going forward. They still sometimes attend my meetups, but like on an individual basis, we don't meet up anymore, and there's another person that lives just outside of my city. And I sometimes meet up with them either at an asexual meetup or in person. I haven't done some asexual meetups for a while because I'm busy doing my online courses and stuff at the moment. Um, so yeah, so go to asexual meetups if you can, though. Be prepared to travel, like put money aside to go to asexual meetups in different places in your country. Be prepared to travel miles, work out where the trains are, the accommodation are. Be prepared to do that because, you need to get out of your comfort zone in order to meet others like you in person. But that will really help you because it will solidify your asexuality, will make you feel a lot more comfortable about your asexuality, it'll bring your asexuality to life. Anytime someone tries to say asexuality is not real, you'll just be able to think, so funny, right? In terms of like, I was with asexuals. You're saying they don't exist. It's just so ignorant. It will make you stronger because you'll be able to, in a way, laugh at people that say asexuality isn't real. Because you're like, well, I spend like 3 hours with other asexuals. So yeah, they're talking rubbish, it'll just make you stronger. It gives you evidence in support of your argument that asexuals are real. And it's not even an argument, as in a literal argument, but it's a point of view, I should say. So make sure that you are confident and comfortable with your asexuality as much as possible. And to do that, you need to make sure you're, looking through asexual resources, going to asexual sites, asexualise.com. There's some resource on there. I've actually got an article now on basically like well-being for asexuals. Like it's a really good article, and it goes through how to have, how to like boost your well-being as an asexual person. It's got like 10 tips, I think it is. I've done that recently. And so yeah, it's very important to have a sense of community, and the more people that you are around who support you, who are asexual, the more that you'll grow in confidence and know that it's okay to be you. That these people that invalidate you or don't understand asexuality, a lot of the time it's because they got their own problems. They're uncomfortable. They're uncomfortable with someone being different to them. They're uncomfortable with the unknown. They're uncomfortable with a different sexuality, and some people will have an adverse reaction to it, but then will come to terms with it. Some people will just never come to terms with it. Other people might take years to accept it. Some people might take weeks or months, and other people who you might even think won't accept it just do. I come across people, I talk about asexuality, and they don't even blink or bat an eyelid. It's like it's completely normal to them. And I'm like, have you heard of asexuality before? And they're like, yeah, sure. And they carry on talking to me. It's just like, it's no big deal. So you have to understand that some people just understand asexuality, accept it. It's no big deal to them. It's just like it's another sexual orientation, and and it's completely okay. And I want you to know it is okay, right? You're very valid. You're very okay, right? There are people that are going to come and go in your life, some of whom you have to part ways from because it's healthier for you and the other person. Like in a relationship, if someone can't accept you in a romantic relationship as you are, with your asexuality, and you've tried to talk to them about it, maybe you've done some negotiation with them on different sexual touching and stuff, you've said how you feel, but if the relationship is making you more miserable than happy, you need to leave that relationship. If you're in a friendship and they're just putting you down about your asexuality, they don't understand it, they're not supportive, you're feeling more and more negative around them, you need to leave that friendship. If your family is making you feel ill and small and belittling you, this is a harder one if you have to live with them. Limit your time with them. Spend more time on online forums and groups, seeing people in real life if you can that are asexual, joining asexual, like I said, groups online and forums and things like that, emailing asexual friends, blogging to your friends about asexuality if you're okay about being on social media and stuff like this. A blog can actually help you because it can actually get your own personality and feelings and emotions out. If you want to start a vlog yourself about your asexual life, you can, but if you're not really good at that type of thing, don't want to go on social media, you can also journal about your asexuality, which should help you as well, especially if you're living at home in a repressed environment where your family just doesn't understand it. Journaling can be very effective, but when you talk to these people, instead of talking to them to try and convince them of your asexuality, don't try and convince them. Just be asexual. Be your asexual self, right? Because if you try and convince someone, you're trying to force your opinion on them and yourself on them as you are, and you're trying to change someone. You're trying to sway someone, right? So you can educate someone and you can explain things to them, but if they don't want to know, you can't force it down them. But what you can do, and you're perfectly entitled to do, is talk about your asexuality and be asexual. And if someone doesn't want you to be yourself around them and wants you to shut up, that person is not healthy for you. And you need to have a plan to leave that situation as soon as you possibly can, because it's going to repress you, be oppressive, and not healthy for you. Does that make sense? I hope I've covered enough of how to deal with friends or family that don't actually accept your asexuality. If you have got any comments or questions about this, please leave them down below. I try to reply to all the comments and questions I get that are nice, that are sensible. Of course, I get the odd comment that is just really, I'm not going to reply to because it's not particularly nice. And maybe it's not terrible, but it's not particularly nice. And some, obviously, if it's a horrible comment, really horrible, I delete them. But, if you've got sensible questions, then please either pop them in chat before I go, because I'm going to go from this video soon, or pop them down below in the comments afterwards. Right, so I hope I've given this crystal clear. I will just do a quick summary once more, just in case you weren't here at the beginning and you want a quick summary, right? So first of all, if you come out as asexual, your life is in danger, get help. Get help from the police, the council, get help from Samaritans, local organisations, phone helplines. Get to a place of safety that's supportive where you're not in risk, right? I am not a qualified therapist. I have got a basic counselling skills course, but I'm not a qualified therapist. I'm not a medical professional. I have worked for the NHS before. That was in a helping someone with a mental health capacity through blogging and social media as a peer trainer. So I have got worked for the NHS before, but in slight different capacity. I have done a weekend life coaching course. So I have got, and I'm a qualified advisor actually, a diploma qualified to advise. So I've actually got a qualification, but I'm not a therapist. I'm not a medical professional. So get help from your doctor if you've got problems at home, if people are being nasty to you. Find out whatever you can do to get out of that situation. This is if people are throwing furniture at you, shouting abuse at you, alcoholic parents who are like being dismissive of your asexuality, shouting and ranting and all this type of thing. If your life is in danger, get proper, qualified, professional help now. Don't wait, do it now, right? So if you're like, if you're living with a friend and that friend is very abusive as well, and they're trying to like raise fights with you, maybe because you've come out as asexual and they're aggressive towards you, you're fearing for your life, get help, right? And always safeguard yourself first, right? So if it's unsafe for you to talk about your asexuality because someone's being aggressive, physically threatening you, verbally, emotionally abusing you, get help. Sometimes we have to be quiet because our life is in jeopardy, right? So do not carry on saying something if you're going to get smacked in the head and stuff like this, right? I have to make that crystal clear. Okay, if you're in a situation where someone's just being offhand with you, verbally putting you down and stuff like that, this isn't good, right? Try and talk to the person and explain how their behavior is making you feel, the behavior. So when you say this, I feel that. So when you say this about my asexuality, I feel it invalidates my feelings and I feel hurt. When you dismiss my asexuality, I feel you don't accept me for who I am. When you say asexuality is just like being a nun and you're abstaining, you can say that's not actually true. Asexuality is this. And when you say that, I feel like my feelings are being invalidated. So you use I words, I feel, and you address the behavior rather than saying you're an absolute idiot, I hate you, and want to want to do whatever, you address the behavior, right? So you do this with friendships. If you're in a relationship, you have to understand that if you're in a relationship and you're already asexual before you got into a relationship and you explain that fully up front to them, then you know what I mean? If suddenly they change about your asexuality, then they've either got to accept you for who you are or leave that relationship, right? Because if you're upfront about being asexual in the first place, if they want sex now, for example, and you don't ever want sex and they do, you have to part ways, right? Because it's not going to be a healthy relationship. You both want something, you can't match each other's needs. You have to part ways, right? If you've been in a relationship for a number of years with someone and then you discover you're asexual, right, you do need to understand that you may be in shock and need time to process that, reflect on it, and think about it and what it means for the relationship. You need to explain to them, if you can, what this means from your point of view of the relationship, and give them chance to reflect, have time to think on what, and have time to ask any questions they want from you to understand it better. They might slip up and not understand it at first. They might think it's abstaining. They might think it's for religious reason. They might come up with some other things that might feel a bit invalidating to you at first because they just don't know what they're talking about. But bear with them and answer their questions. Obviously, if they come back at you and they start being aggressive, going, I thought you were heterosexual and I hate you. How dare you do this to me, right? Are they valid in feeling that way? I'm not going to say that they're not valid because they might feel betrayed and hurt and upset. But if they continue to be aggressive with you like this, then and they're not going to allow you to be your asexual self, they're not going to accept it, you need to leave that relationship, right? But you're not always going to get the reaction you want. It'd be great if everyone accepts your asexuality, but you have to understand and prepare yourself for the fact you might get bad reaction. Doesn't mean to say that that bad reaction is always going to be the case. They might just need time to process it. Sometimes, myself, I have some new information come into my life. I have an anxious attachment style. When new information comes in, I can panic. I get anxiety and I'm like overwhelmed, right? And so if someone's giving me this new information, I'll be like, oh my God, but I thought you were this. And you've completely disorientated me. I don't know what's going on anymore. And so in those case scenarios, I can't immediately change my point of view or perspective of that person if I've not known them to be that thing, right? So you have to understand that some people are going to react negatively or react in a way that's coming from a place that their anxiety is triggered, that their emotions are triggered, that they're confused, right? You have to give them time and space to come to terms with it and to understand it. And they may not be happy with it at first, but then they might come through it. They might be like, oh, okay. After a while, like, it might take a day or two or whatever, and it might take, time for them. And then they might, start saying, okay, so can you actually tell me more about this? Because I'm just really confused right now. Like, you had sex with me, like, like 2 days ago, and now you're talking to me about this. It doesn't make any sense to me. So you have to allow them to feel their own emotions. Hopefully, if they're a healthy person, they should be saying, well, I feel angry now, I feel frustrated, rather than going into a massive rage, right? But when you tell someone something that they're not expecting, it's a shock, you can have an adverse reaction really quickly. They can be like, oh my God. Like, they might be like, just get away from me because you're not who I thought you were. And the reason I'm saying this to you is because I've been in situations where someone's told me things, not that they're asexual, but they've told me things that I wasn't expecting, and I'm completely taken back and in shock, right? So if I'm putting myself in the perspective of someone who's been in a relationship with you a while and they didn't know you're asexual and you're just telling them now, it is going to be shocking to a lot of them, right? And we have to allow for that and understand that it's not just because you're telling them you're asexual, it's because you've said something about yourself that they never realized. If they've been in a relationship with you for 3 years, they never realize they're asexual. That calls into question their own mind. Like, I chose this person for me. I've been with them for 3 years. I thought they were this way, but they're not. It calls into question their own judgment, if you like, of the situation and of you. And it can make them question themselves, right? So if we're getting into more of the psychology now of how people think, it can make them question themselves because hang on a minute, our relationship's based on the fact I thought you're heterosexual, if that's the case, for 3 years, but now you're telling me it's not. Like, how do I deal with that? Because they have to then decide whether they want to stay in a relationship with you, with the person you actually are right now. And this is the difficulty, because in life we have to change, we have to evolve, we have to grow, because if we don't, we die inside. But when we change, evolve, and grow, and we get to know ourselves better, it can mean that we're further and further apart from the person we used to be when we first got into that relationship, and therefore we might not be compatible anymore. We might not be suitable. And that isn't necessarily a problem with them or with you. It's just how you've evolved over time as individuals and how you are now in the present moment. And what we do, we tend to think about what we were like back when we got together. And you always want it to go back and be like that. But then the reality is it's changed. The dimensions, the dynamics of your relationship has changed. And you can't always get that back because you're not those people anymore. And so you have to deal with the here and now. And this is one of the most mature things you have to do in your life, but the most difficult. You have to realize that sometimes you're just not compatible anymore, however hard you try. And the relationship is hard work. So you shouldn't just go, oh, right, I'm just going to go and find someone else right now. That isn't the answer, right? Because no one's going to be perfect for you. No one's probably going to want exactly the same amount of sex you do or do not want. No one's going to want exactly the same amount of touching you do or do not want. No one's going to be like the same hobbies that you need them to like, all that. You're not going to have a perfect relationship, right? But you want two people that have still got compatibility. They've got goals and aspirations for themselves and for the relationship. But if you're both swimming in different directions and your sexual orientations just don't line up anymore, and you're having more down days and more down times, and you're not really experiencing life to the fullest and being happy anymore, then you need to part ways, So you have to allow that person to come to terms with it. You have to come to terms with a new dynamic. You try and work on the relationship. Go to couple therapy if it's going to help you. Obviously, if you've got a heterosexual person you're in a relationship with, and then the therapist is heterosexual and they don't understand asexuality, they might take the side of the heterosexual and try and say, well, you should be having sex with them. So you don't want that either. So be very careful with couples therapy. A lot of the time, it's better to have therapy separately. But, it can work, couples therapy. I've known of an asexual person who's in a heterosexual relationship with a heterosexual, and they said that couple therapy did work for them. So it can work in some instances, but be very aware of that, right? And so what you do is you give them an opportunity in a relationship to fully come to terms with it and deal with the aftermath of that. There's going to be some adjustments that may need on both of your parts. It's going to take some time. It might take time to actually repair the kind of like maybe the damage of the shock that has done to your relationship. But some relationships will be closer because of it, because they know who you are more, and it'll draw you together more, and it'll add a new dynamic and dimension that will be healthy for you, because you can kind of explore it together, especially if you've only just discovered you're asexual. You can explore it together more. But if you're always butting heads and that person just can't accept it and they hate you and they resent you for your asexuality, that's the time to leave. And then with family dynamics, like I said, like sometimes you have to stay there because you're like you're 15 or something, and there's say you've got guardians or other family members like aunt, uncle, granddad you can go and live with. Maybe that's an option for you. If not, then you might need to stick it out living with them, but have a plan that you can get some money together. Like in the UK, you can get a job when you're like 16. You can get a job even when you're 15, but there's hours that you only have just a certain amount of hours if you're a certain age. So check on where you live. But most people, like when they're about 18, they can leave home. I left home when I was 19. And I live in the UK. So, have a plan that you can move out as soon as you can. Limit your time with those family members that are not being nice to you. Make a life for yourself as much as possible with other friends, hobbies outside the home, meeting asexuals online, video calls, messaging, audio calls. Meet them up in person with them in person if you can. Get a life of your own so that you've got more security and support outside of the family system, and make sure that you have a job and that you hunt for places to live that are affordable for you. It's very difficult in this time we're living in where money is scarce, but there are golden opportunities if you spend hours searching for them online. It might take you hours. When I had to move home because I was threatened with homelessness at the end of last year, I spent up to 14 hours a day looking for a new place to live, right? I live on my own. I lived on my own there. But I was threatened with homelessness because my landlord was selling the place. And so I moved here, and it wasn't easy. This is much more expensive than my old place. My voice is going now. but I managed to achieve it, right? So you can do it, right? But you might need to get some support. You might see what benefits are available to you if you move out of home. Like, you can only get certain benefits. You can't get all benefits. If you live in with your parents, some benefits offers will be like, we already got home. You don't need our support. But if you end up being homeless, sometimes people can support you more. So if you've got no fixed abode, but you'd have to be very careful doing that. That's not something I would necessarily recommend. um, I think, it's better to contact your local authorities about anything like that and the people who specialize in that. But I would say, like, make a plan for when you are old enough, get a job, get money to move out. Some people can share with other people for a while. You might have to get a bed sit initially, which isn't great. It's just basically a room in a house, and that can pose its own nightmares with living with people. And then, if you want to explain your asexuality to them, they might not accept it. So it could be another headache for you. But, you need to get out of a situation, not worry about every eventuality, because you could move into a home with someone who's got, who accepts your asexuality and who thinks it's great and who wants to know more about it, and who wants to have asexual parties with you and like Netflix and really chill with popcorn and stuff. You know what I mean? So, don't think negatively all the time. There's people out there that will support you, that do love you for who you are. I've got people on Facebook, for example, who are not asexual that support me. There's people who come on this channel who are not asexual that support me and the community here, right? There are people who are allies to asexuals, even though they're not asexuals themselves, right? They do exist. They're real people and they're very supportive. So don't just think because someone's a different sexual orientation to you, they're not going to be supportive, because there are some supportive people out there. I hope this has been useful, helpful, insightful video for you. If it has, please give this video a thumbs up. Thanks for all the thumbs up so far. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss an episode, and grab a copy of Asexual Perspectives if you want to know more about the asexual spectrum and about love, life, and sex from an asexual point of view. It's very, very insightful and there's ask questions and answers them pretty much all the questions you've ever thought about asexuality when you're new to asexuality, discovering it, about the asexual spectrum, about all the fresh questions you're afraid to ask, like, what about masturbation and porn and BDSM and kinks, all that type of thing. Do asexuals do any of that? Have any part in it? The answers are all in here by 46 asexuals and myself. So grab a copy of that. It's on Amazon. You can also get it in Barnes & Noble, Waterstones, Blackwell's, and all good bookshops, right? So yes, there's me on the back of it. Anyway, love you and leave you for now. Always take pride in being asexual. Remember, it is non-negotiable. You are asexual and that's it. And love yourself for who you are, because you are ace. And I'll see you soon next video live stream. Thanks for watching. There's people been watching for all this time. I love you dearly. Bye bye. Take care. Love you lots.